Hello and welcome, this is the Ch.26 Reads, and today I'm going to be reading The Lost Heir by Sutherland, and this is Chapter 26. Whirlpool? Tsunami said, thoroughly astonished. Why would you want to kill me? She'd rather thought he was too boring to be a suspect.
Rubbish, said the green dragon with haughty air. I would never. The spear poked him again, a little harder this time. Ow, my goodness, an enemy. I had no idea you were capable of such powerful magic. I must be a brilliant teacher. Of course, I'd be more impressed if it weren't stabbing me. Ow!
An enemy shifted on her talons uncomfortably. I didn't think it would be you, she said.
We should tell Queen Blister how accomplished you are, Whirlpool said in his oozy voice. She'll be so terribly pleased.
Don't you dare, Tsunami snapped.
Do you really think I'll find you threatening from in there, he asked.
If you do, I'll tell Mother you tried to kill me, she said. How do you think she'll feel about that? He shrugged and reached up to play with the gold hoop earring in his ear.
She might find it quite admirable, actually. After all, I was merely trying to ensure that an enemy deer would be queen.
Me? An enemy's wings fluttered, opened, and closed. You don't even like me that much. Why do anything for me?
Well, Whirlpool said, frankly, I don't want to marry her, he pointed at Tsunami.
Wow, Glory said cheerfully. That was totally on my list of reasons why someone might want to kill you. Don't worry, Tsunami snapped. I'd rather be torn apart by tiger sharks than ever marry you.
But I do want to be king, Whirlpool said.
He held out his talons as if imagining more gold rings looping around his claws.
So I thought I'd get rid of you. I'd improve my chances of marrying a more agreeable daughter.
I don't ever want to marry you either, an enemy cried.
It's really not up to you, Whirlpool said, taking a step back,
up the path to the cave entrance.
Once I tell Queen Coral and Queen Blister about what you can do, they'll be so grateful they'll let me have anything I want. But of course, then you'll be very busy using your powers to win the war, and you probably won't survive that. So I really should ask for Auklet instead.
He tapped his snout thoughtfully, as if he was musing to himself. You can't tell them, Tsunami shouted. She was supposed to protect an enemy from being used like this. It was the one thing her sister had asked of her. And instead, now it would be her fault if an enemy became Blister's pawn. She lunged toward the waterfall, but Clay jumped forward at the same time and held her back. Blue light crackled in front of them, and down below, the eels clustered menacingly, like a sinister clump of seaweed. But at the same time, on the other side of the waterfall, an enemy was moving too. She seized the spear from the air, spun it around, and smacked the side of it into Whirlpool's head. He staggered forward, then crumpled without a sound. His wings tipped sideways, overbalancing him, and in one sudden movement, his body slipped over the edge into the electric eel moat. An enemy yelped with fear and dropped her weapon. She reached her talons toward the water, but it was too late. A blinding flash of blue sizzled up the cascading waterfall. Tsunami jumped back, and all 5 dragonettes huddled close in the center of the island. The water in the moat churned and seethed around the spot where Whirlpool had disappeared. Thick green tails thrashed through the bubbles, and sparks flew as if several bolts of lightning were striking at once. Sunny covered her eyes, and Clay put his wing around her. Tsunami wished she could do the same for an enemy on the far side of the moat. Her little sister looked petrified in place. Slowly, the flashes calmed down until only an occasional sap appeared in the wall. And then they all stopped. The waterfall was quiet, and so was the moat. Tsunami could see the eels, still clustered around a large, dark shape at the bottom of the pool. But their frenzy had subsided, and she guessed she was lucky she couldn't see any details of what they were doing now. An enemy? She called. Are you all right? An enemy didn't answer. Her blurred outline was motionless, as if she was one of Orca's statues. I'm not sure I should tell you this, Starflight said, but you might be able to go through the water right now. Tsunami whipped around toward him. Really? Why? He pointed to the eels. After a burst like that, they'll need a while to recharge, I think, so they may not be able to let off any shocks for at least a minute or two. Wait, he added as Tsunami flared her wings. But I'm not sure. I didn't read those scrolls as often as the ones about dragons. I'm sorry. Starflight's black head drooped. It's probably not worth the risk. I wouldn't listen to me. But Starflight, you know everything, Sunny said. I'm sure you're right. I could go through and turn off the waterfall, Tsunami said. Then it would only be me risking it. Starflight looked miserable. But it was my idea, he said. And if I might be wrong, shouldn't I? Poor Starflight, Tsunami twined her tail around his. She knew he wanted to be brave and helpful, but this was the kind of thing she did, not him. Don't be silly, she said. This is my kingdom. I'm responsible for doing the crazy things here. Do you remember what the scroll said about electric eels? Clay asked Glory. The Rainwing lifted her wings slightly. I don't think that was specific, she said. They can run out of charge for short periods of time, but I don't know if this is definitely one of them, or how long it might last. Think it through. Be more like Starflight. Don't be impulsive, Tsunami thought. But then, what if this is our only chance to escape? She glanced over at an enemy, and I have to help her. But if I die, what happens to the others? She clenched her talons. An image of her mother's council flashed through her head. All right, she said. Let's vote. Holy moons, Glory said. Seriously, what have you done with the real Tsunami? Quickly, Tsunami said, shooting a glance at the quiet waterfall. I believe Starflight, Sunny said. I think you can make it through, definitely. I don't, Starflight said glumly. I vote that nobody tries, just to be safe. Well, I want to get out of here, Glory said, and I'm willing to risk Tsunami's bossy scales to do it. She shot Tsunami a toothy grin. Clay shook his head slowly. I don't know. You're too important to all of us, Tsunami. I don't think you should do it. Well, that doesn't help, Tsunami said with a snort. Now I have to decide for myself anyway. Some council you guys are, but those are pretty much the votes she'd been expecting. And she listened to all of them, and she knew what she wanted to do. She took a deep breath, spun around, and launched herself at the wall of water. It felt like leaping into a freezing hailstorm, icy drops pelting her snout and closed eyes, slicing into her gills through the seaweed bandage, hammering the fractures in her ribs. She braced herself for the lightning-sharp pain, but a moment later, her talons thumped onto solid rock. Tsunami opened her eyes, and she skidded to a stop. She made it to the other side of the moat, and her scales were still intact. She grabbed an enemy's shoulders and shook her until the little pale dragon looked up to meet her eyes. You have to get out of here, Tsunami said. We're going to escape, and I don't want it to look like you were involved. Go find Mother and hang around where she can see you so you have an alibi. All right, are you listening? But look what I did, an enemy whispered, pointing to the pool. You didn't mean to do that, Tsunami said. She knew way too clearly how an enemy felt right now. An enemy, it was an accident. You didn't push him into the moat. And if it hadn't happened, think of how many dragons you might have had to kill with your powers. Now you can tell Mother that with no trainer, your powers seem to be getting weaker. Mess up all the time. Make sure she thinks you really aren't ready and won't be for a long time. But one day, and then we started. One day very soon, this war will be over. We're going to end it. Trust me. Tsunami squeezed an enemy's front talons in hers. Now get out of here. Good luck, an enemy whispered. Tsunami wrapped her wings around her sister. Good luck to you too. An enemy fled up the cave path. Her pale wings fluttered like moss as she disappeared around the bend. Tsunami hurried to the chain on the wall. The guard had yanked it down. Could she pull it back up? She tried hauling the chain in the opposite direction, and felt it slide jerkily through her claws. Clanking noises rattled from the ceiling, and she stopped for a moment, glancing up the path where the guards had gone. Were there guards at the entrance? What if they hurt her? Hey kid, a raspy voice croaked. Tsunami jumped and looked around. The scrawny sandwing was watching her from his prison island. Even through the waterfall, Tsunami could see the dark glitter of his eyes. You could do the same thing for me, he hissed. Set me free. Tsunami turned back to the chain and kept pulling. She didn't know what was in store for Coral's prisoners, but she also didn't know why they were here, or whether they deserved it. Except for two of them. Somewhere in this cavern, Riptide and Webs were trapped, possibly awaiting execution. She had to find them too. What sounded like an enormous metallic groan echoed overhead, and then suddenly, the cascading water around her friend's island shut off. There was a beat of silence as they all stared up at the ceiling. Sunny leaped off first, flapping her wings to clear the moat, and the others followed her quickly. Tsunami pushed past them to lead the way up the path. "What about me?" yelled the imprisoned Sandwing. "I have to find Riptide and Webs," Tsunami said to her friends. "Did anyone see them on the way in?" "I did," Clay said. "They're on one island together, not far from the entrance." The 5 of them hurried along the path. Tsunami kept her wings curled in and tried not to look at the fizzing blue water walls or the lurking eels. They rounded the last corner and saw the greenish light of the summer palace up ahead. Tsunami spotted the guards first and pushed her friends back into the shadows. Only 3, she thought. 3 guards stood on the ledge outside the prison, chatting and tossing their spears from town to town. They didn't look very threatening, and perhaps they were secretly on the dragonette's side, if they had allowed an enemy through to see Tsunami. She didn't want to fight them if she could avoid it. She didn't want to shed any more seawing blood ever again. "There," Clay whispered in her ear. He pointed over her shoulder. "That island, just inside the entrance." Tsunami spotted the 2 blue shapes moving beyond the wall of water. She also saw a chain running along the stone beside their island. If she could get to it without the guards noticing, and then move the mechanism without the guards hearing it, Riptide and Webs would be free to escape with the dragonettes. "There it is again," Sunny whispered. "Don't you hear all that?" "Hear what?" Clay whispered back. "I don't know," Sunny said. I think I'm hearing wing beats." "There are sea wings flying all over the palace," Glory pointed out. "I know," Sunny said. "This is a bigger, higher, I'm not sure." "Don't worry so much," Tsunami said. "I'm sure you're just imagining things." Sunny stamped one of her feet and craned her neck toward the outside. "No, I'm definitely sure," she said firmly. "I hear wing beats above the canopy. Lots and lots of them." "Sunny," Tsunami started, but then Clay's head shot up, and so did Starflight's. "I think she's right," Clay said. Tsunami inhaled sharply, realizing what that meant. "You don't think—" Starflight lashed his tail. "I smell fire, too." Tsunami didn't have time to think or come up with a safe, logical solution. She burst out of their hiding spot and ran toward the guards. "Look out!" she yelled. "We're in the palace!" All 3 guards jumped, and 2 of them accidentally dropped their spears over the ledge. They stared at Tsunami as if her horns were blazing columns of fire. "Move!" she shouted. Tsunami shoved them aside, stood on the ledge, and yelled, "Sea wings! Mother! Look out! We're under attack!" And then the first firebomb crashed through the canopy. And that is the end of Chapter 26. Once again, this is the 2nd book in the Wings of Fire series by Ch.26. Sutherland. Have a great day.